Division of John Wiley & Sons Incorporated of New York. Mr. Cutts holds 2 degrees in engineering, a bachelor's degree from MIT and a master's from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. Mr. Cutts worked for 9 years as a mechanical engineer and then spent 5 years as a freelance writer. He joined Wiley in 1976 as an editor for professional level books in mechanical engineering. In 1982, he started the electronic publishing division at Wiley and now has company-wide responsibility for database publishing. Mr. Cutts is chairman of the Publications and Database Committee of the American Society of Mechanical Engineers and chairman of the Database Committee of the Professional and Scholarly Publishing Division of the AAP. Mr. Cutts is a prolific writer. In addition to publishing in a number of national newspapers and periodicals, he has written 8 books on a wide variety of subjects. He is presently editing the new edition of the Kent Mechanical Engineer's Handbook. Please welcome Mr. Cutts.
Thank you, Stephen. Although according to the marquee, I'm the soup of the day. I'm going to take off my jacket if you don't mind. I noticed that Bill Bagel, my friend Bill, had spoken to you last, October, November. I usually wish I was as funny as Bill. He's the chairman of the Professional and Scholarly Publishing Division of AAP, and I remember at a meeting once, when he got up to address the group, he said, "I'm tired of hearing the word chair substitute for chairman." Now, if you've seen Bagel, he's a lot heavier than I am, and he said, "As a matter of fact, I'm not a chair. I prefer to be called a sofa." And from the audience, someone said, "You're not a sofa, you're a love seat." Okay, well, I'm going to schmooze about electronic publishing for 2 hours this morning. We'll have a break at about 5 of 11 for 10 minutes. I think you can sort of ask me questions as we go along rather than hold questions, unless it gets to the point where you're asking a question every second or third sentence, and then we'll see. We'll change the procedure. Since there are no prerequisites for the course, I don't know how much everybody knows. So we'll start off on the sort of the lowest common denominator, and we'll see how things go. Mostly what I'm going to talk about is the database publishing part of the electronic publishing industry. I'm not going to talk too much about two-way cable, video text, teletext, or a lot of other things that have application that is, compared to database, I think of less interest to you. At this point, it's of less interest to me, so I'm not going to talk about it an awful lot. Basically, the database publishing industry is divided into, we can say 3 parts. There are vendors, sometimes called hosts, particularly in Europe, who are the online retrieval systems. They're the people who have banks of computers, who have databases stored in time-sharing way, made available for access to users through telecommunications. I would assume that most of you are reasonably familiar with this group. It includes, for example, Dialog, which still is part of Lockheed, although is separately operated. Still buried in the Lockheed balance sheet. I say buried because anybody who wants to buy it can never find out exactly what Dialog's revenues are. SDC, which is also California-based. BRS, which is based in Latham, New York, which is near Albany. BRS started really as a kind of an offshoot of a library, medical library, cataloging project. Dialog and SDC, I believe, started as offshoots of federal government cataloging projects. These are the main systems that are used by the library community. Now, there are other vendors who are more consumer-oriented or are used by special parts of the professional community. For example, there's the Dow Jones News Retrieval Service based in Princeton. Carries a lot of stock quotes, of course, but also has a wide variety of databases now, including a news service, movie reviews, sports information, the Academic American Encyclopedia, published by Grolier, a number of other databases. There's the source, Reader's Digest, has a wide variety of databases of particular interest to people at home. I'll explain, as I talk about producers, more about these vendors and what kinds of databases they have. Briefly, the source, these two databases have a great many more customers than these. If I can jump over to the other players in the game, the producers or publishers are the groups, companies, what have you, who produce the information, basically, that goes into these vendor systems. And then we have the users. We don't talk about readers in this business, we talk about users. These are the people who access the information. As I'll talk later, the users basically, at this time, those who use the databases that are on these retrieval systems generally do so on behalf of someone else. They're basically research librarians. Most of the users who use these retrieval systems are the end users themselves. It's a different kind of information. I'll get into that in a moment. So basically the players in the game then are the vendors who own the hardware, which you access by telecommunications, the producers who produce the stuff that's inside the systems, and the users who are interested in getting at that stuff. Quickly, let me sketch out what the hardware situation looks like. Basically, let's suppose you're a user. I don't know, how many of you have actually accessed databases and done any searching? Well, you could either have, let's assume you had a something like a Silent 700, a TI printer. You connect to the database, to the retrieval system, through telecommunications, your telephone, and there's a modem connection. You dial up the retrieval system. You use a number of passwords to get into it. If we jump back here for a second, Dialog has about 15,000 passwords. BRS has, I don't know, let's say 5,000. SDC somewhere in between. These are, you need a password to get into the system because, as I'll explain later, they charge you mostly by the amount of time that you're accessing different databases. Computerization is wonderful because you can do all sorts of bean counting with computers. Makes it easy. If you have, let's say, 100 databases, which Dialog has roughly, you can keep track of whose database is being used by a wide number of people at any given time, and you can assign their hourly charges to the right producer, so that producer gets paid. Basically, then you dial up with your telephone through some sort of packet switching network like Telenet or TimeNet to the retrieval system. You tell them by some 4-digit or 4-letter acronym which database you want to look at, and you're off and running in a search. You can have it printed out immediately on something like a TI 700, silent 700, or you can display it on a microcomputer. You can do just about anything you want with the information. In my office, we use the printer directly because we want the record. Later on, I'll pass around a typical search. This is one that we made on the Harvard Business Review because we wanted to find all the mentions in the Harvard Business Review back through 1971 of trade shows. This is a result of a typical search printout. This is what might be delivered by the librarian to the end user, or the librarian might instead choose to summarize this information sometime. Any questions so far? No. One more thing. Basically, the way the business got started was that the producers were the bibliographic services. If you look through, Dialogue publishes a catalog. If you look through the catalog, what you mostly find are index and abstracts to the world's literature. I mean, you've all heard of chemical abstracts. You all undoubtedly know that they computerized a long time ago. They made their abstracts and indexes to the world's chemical literature available on all of these systems for speedy lookup. The power of the systems is that you can search through, well, for example, American Psychological Association has psych abstracts online on many different vendors. It has 400,000 citations in the file. So let's assume you want to look up something, some term, for all the articles that have been published in the world's literature that abstract and service covers. You have a tremendous number of citations to flip through, and of course the computer can do that for you extremely fast. So basically, we have a very wide range because of the fact that at least 55,000 scholarly journals are published in the world. We had a tremendous range of abstracting and indexing services that were producing paper products. They began to computerize their information and make it available to the librarians for searching, or to end users, but basically librarians, through these various vendors. These are the US vendors. I should have mentioned that Dialogue is now the major vendor in Europe. There are really no international barriers to this. Another major vendor in Europe is called DataStar, which is run by Radio Suisse in Bern. DataStar has approximately 2,000 passwords. Dialogue in Europe is about twice the size of DataStar. Incidentally, Dialogue guards the names of its users. There is now a discussion, which is heated, between the producers and the vendors. The producers say, well, we publish these abstracts, indexes, these citations, and the customers, the users who access our information are our customers. Therefore, we want their names and addresses so we can reach them, provide additional training, and I'll get into training in a minute. Tell them about the beauty of our service, the beauty of our information, get them to use our database more. Dialogue says, no, they're our customers. We don't want to give you their names, because if we give you their names, you might go and start your own service. I mean, some compositors, for example, have toyed with the notion of starting their own online retrieval services themselves. Chem Abstracts, which is big enough and has enough information, is going to start its own online service. So there is a battle between, and I bring this up because I attended a meeting where we got into this for a couple of hours yesterday. there is a battle between the producers and vendors as to who owns the user's names. Whose customers are they? As a matter of fact, there's a battle as to who can be called the publisher. Some vendors say we're the publisher. The producers say, no, we've been calling ourselves the publishers for years. You can't take that title to yourself. So there's an interesting argument going on now as to whose customers these are, who should be reaching them, who should be training them, who should be marketing to them. Now, if we were to go through the dialogue catalog, you'd find that there were a tremendous that the coverage of databases is extremely wide. There are, in the area of patents, which you would think would be a fruitful area for having citation information, it turns out that as I look through here, there are about a dozen patent-type databases. The most lucrative database areas in terms of revenue are chemistry and business. Chemists search the literature an awful lot. Chemists say everything starts with chemistry. I don't care what the physicists say, the chemists say everything starts with chemistry. They are probably the best literature searchers among the sci-tech, and even better than the medical. I should have included medical in that group. There are chemistry, medicine, and business are the three major areas that are the most financially lucrative in my view. Dialogue has it looks like about 12 to 15 chemistry databases, and a few in medicine and biosciences. There are maybe 3 or 4 more than that. Energy and the environment, considering that the government has collected a tremendous amount of information, is very well represented, as is science and technology and material science. One of the things that engineers and scientists would like to have available to them, which is not available to them at present. Remember that mostly what you have online now are abstracts and indexes. You have citations. Let's assume you want to find the values of properties of a class of materials. You're building something. You say, I want to find out all of the lightweight materials that are particularly corrosion resistant. The way you get at this, if you try and do it through this kind of a literature search, is, of course, you get titles of papers, you get abstracts, you have to then go and look for the papers, you have to get the papers, because mostly what we have here is journal articles have been abstracted and indexed. You get the papers, you read through the papers, you see if you can find the information that you're looking for. Or you go to handbooks. Handbooks turn out to be very inaccurate in terms of property values. Errors are often perpetuated for decades in handbooks, mostly because handbooks are copied from earlier handbooks. That's the easiest and fastest way to get them done. McGraw-Hill, for example, which has a very large handbook publishing program, has a 1/3 rule. At least 1/3 of every new handbook contains materials from the previous edition. It's just too expensive to redo the whole thing. But you can see how cumbersome this is if you want to find something like a real piece of information. What material scientists, engineers, others would like to have in these online, in these vendors, is more than citations. They'd like to have a database of property values. And there are the Metals Properties Council and other groups are working toward that end. Well, as you can imagine, that's an enormous job. I mean, you have to go and find people who are willing to collect the information. You have to assure yourself that all of it is there for any group of materials. You have to assure yourself that it's correct. You have to get enough lawyers to make sure you're not sued when somebody uses a property value and the bridge falls down or the building falls down or something catches on fire. Nevertheless, that's something that's being looked at very hard. Another thing that producers are beginning to do, and you find it reflected only in a couple of places now in something like this, and I'll pass this around after a while, is that in addition to the citations from the various journals, the primary publishers of those journals are beginning to put the full text of those journals online with a deep back file. I started doing that for the Harvard Business Review early in 1982. We did a joint venture with Harvard because it costs a lot of money to do this sort of thing. And in July, we went online with the 1982 issues last July to that point. That was the first 3 issues in 1982. Plus a citation file that went back beyond 1971. The American Chemical Society, I should say that in the Harvard Business Review, within the next couple of days, we will have the full text of every issue, every article and every issue back through 1976 up online, fully searchable. The American Chemical Society, which publishes, I think, 14 journals, has been running an experiment with the 14 journals online, full text, except for tables and chemical structures and reactions. It turns out that, question?
Yes, when you're putting the articles online, is that all done by keystroke, or is there use of readers?
Okay, I'll get to that. I'll come back to that. You try to get away from keystroke. With the Harvard Business Review, what we did was, because the Harvard Business Review has very few equations, he's looking for the super. Because the Harvard Business Review has very few equations, in fact, they try to keep it to 0. And because there's a lot of lead, and because it was beautifully printed, we scanned it. And you know those machines that were built to convert text, regular printing to Braille, Kurzweil machines. The compositor of the Harvard Business Review, they only started composing electronically in 1982. But we were able to take the reprints, which were essentially the original copy, and scan them and make the review machine readable that way. In that case, it was cheaper than keystroking. What the American Chemical Society is able to do, I guess I should cover this now. ACS composes its journals electronically, except for chemical structures and tables. For some reason, they don't compose the tables electronically. So they create a machine-readable form of their journals, which they are able to load into computers that these people have, or that they now have themselves. We should put ACS down. It's another vendor company. And make the entire text machine-readable. That means, in most cases, that we will be able to combine a citation file, which might include keyword indexes, with the full text, and makes searching a much more, we think, accurate and much more adventurous thing to do. Indexers often get things a little bit wrong. They don't index deeply enough. There's stuff buried in articles that you don't find just simply through a citation. Not simply property values, which might be buried in tables. Not simply equations, but just discussions that might be somewhat off the main point of the article. nevertheless contain some piece of information that somebody might want. Buried back in an article that was published 1980. You might have seen it if you were a professional user in that area. You don't remember where you saw it. What are you going to do? Go to the stacks and thumb through 24 issues to try and find this term? I mean, that's an endless process, obviously. It was as bad as searching the citation. So the hope is that there is a reason, and not everybody agrees there is a reason, for putting the full text of the articles up in addition to the citations. I should say parenthetically that our current project is, having done the Harvard Business Review, we're now working on our Kirk-Othmer Encyclopedia of Chemical Technology. That's a 26-volume encyclopedia. We're in the third edition. We've published maybe 22 of those volumes. We've got 4 more to go. We're going to make that scientific encyclopedia the first online scientific encyclopedia. The first stage of that online file is due up in about 2 months. Kirk-Othmer, being so big, has been mentioned in the American Chemical Society's Journal of Chemical Information, it's probably not the exact title, as being very difficult to search through for certain pieces of information. It turns out that a 26-volume encyclopedia, which has 100 million, how much you either print online or offline. And because of downloading, and because of people taking the data and not going back into these systems to look at the data again and again and again, but looking at it on their own system and not paying those telecommunications and accessing charges, the producers and the vendors are looking at the notion of charging much more money by character count for what you print online, particularly online. There's some offline printing too. What that means is, at the end of the day, you put a message, during the day you put a message in the system and it says, I've done this search, send me this list of citations, 2,000 citations. And after 6 o'clock, California time, when there's not so much searching, everybody's gone home, they use the computers to print out that information and they put it in the mail to you. Some people print online, of course, like I do in my office, and many other people do. There will be a bigger charge for that by character count from now on, mostly driven by the downloading situation. This has created another situation, and it's created the hurry up and wait situation. I was in the Army. I know all about hurry up and wait. The end user, physicist, engineer, business person, goes to the librarian, says, find me all the articles on this subject. Librarian comes back with a list of articles. They look at the list. Well, they've got some articles from a journal that's right in their own library. They've got some articles from the journal that's in Georgetown's library. Or let's assume you're in a smaller city than this without the library facilities that this city obviously has. Some in the local university, some in the local public library, some in their own library, some their friend has 2 miles away. And some journals they can't find copies of those journals. Some damn Hong Kong Journal of Hydrology. It's got an article by some guy who was educated at Yale and is back working someplace and publishes in the Hong Kong Journal for some reason. Or it's of an issue that is so old that they don't have it anymore. The British Library Lending Division in Boston Spa keeps 55,000 journals going back a long, long time, maybe back to the original issue for each one of them. They got photocopying machines on roller skates. So you go into these services and you find you need more articles that you can't get. So you go to the British Lending Library, which doesn't pay royalties to the publishers, doesn't respect copyright, and you buy this for, I don't know, $2.50 an article. Cheap. Or maybe $5.50, $7.50, I don't remember the exact price. It's too cheap anyway, from our point of view. They send it to you in the mail, you get it in a week or two. So you got this hurry up and wait situation has been created. You can search the world's literature, you can find hundreds of articles on any subject, virtually, and then you can't find the articles. How are we all going to deal with this? Well, right in the Library of Congress, and is a research project that is a mirror image of a publisher-driven research project from the big European publishers. That latter research project is called the Adonis, or Adonis, if you're from that side of the Atlantic. The right-hand side, if you look at the globe, the Mercator projection, it's Adonis. Here we call it Adonis. That's intended to try and deal with, A, the fact that you've got a lot of so-called information providers making money by selling journal articles in particular, or copies. You know, one of the things is, one of the worst publishing projects you can think of, well, the worst one you can think of is to publish a second book by someone who has come to you with a first book that doesn't do so. There is no animal on the earth more dangerous than a recently published author who says, I've got another idea. The next worst thing you can publish is conference proceedings. I mean, they usually don't sell because most of it's junk. I mean, people, they really put their energies when they finally publish the journal article, and it's reviewed by 3 people, everyone home. And it's really a quality piece of work. Often conference proceedings are not particularly good. They maybe sell, for a really good conference, 1,000 copies. Nevertheless, there's often a paper that you want, and nobody bought that conference proceeding, and the publisher only published 500 copies, and it's gone. You maybe would have to come here to this library to find it, to read it. British Library, other people often collect these things because there is a market, particularly the first year or two after the conference. A lot of people miss the conference, they want to get a copy of the paper, the author doesn't have any more, they send to the British Library. How are you going to deal with this situation? The European publishers, particularly Elsevier, which is one of, there are only 3 publishers in Holland, and they own the whole country. And everything across the board, telecommunications, everything. Elsevier is a gigantic publisher. It has, I don't know, hundreds of journals. In their view, they were getting killed by this business of people going to the BLLD, British Library Lending Division, on the basis of searches and ordering up copies of articles from journals. And Elsevier wasn't getting paid, and they said we're losing subscriptions, because another thing that's now happening is, as subscriptions drop, you charge more money for your subscriptions to make up for it. And the reason subscriptions drop, of course, is library committees say we can't afford this anymore. We can't afford to build more shelf space to house more journals. We're going to cut down on our subscriptions. You raise the price, drive subscriptions down further. People say, look, I'll just search the literature when I find something I want. I used to browse this journal. I don't have to anymore. When I find something I want, I'll order it from the British Library Lending Division. Elsevier was convinced it was losing a substantial amount of money. Got together a consortium of publishers. It said, let's start our own fulfillment service, except we'll do it in a way that will be so attractive that the BLLD, which now is planning to build 2 more buildings with more photocopying machines and more roller skates, because the BLLD is prohibited by the crazy British law that says it cannot put these publications in machine-readable form. Maybe it's not traditional. but they are prohibited from doing so. So they're going to just keep building stacks, and they're going to keep putting journals in the stacks. They're going to keep running around with the roller skates and the Xerox machine. Okay. Adonis said, okay, BLLD, this was a group of 6 publishers. Wiley used to be part of it. We're going to tell you what we're going to do. We're going to come into your place, and we're going to, instead of scanning the journals with a Kurzweil, which means that you can search, everything's in digital form, you can search down to the word. And that search that I held up was done, these are paragraphs from inside Harvard Business Review articles. The words trade shows appear buried in these paragraphs. The computer goes in and it finds every place trade shows was mentioned, buried in the articles. Instead of doing it that way, digital down to the word, we're going to put it onto an optical disc, which allows you to search to the page or to the article, really. And we'll combine this optical disc with a standard citation searching system. The optical disc scanning is a raster scan, goes back and forth. Okay. It's not, however, like a Kurzweil scan, in that you, as I said, you can't search to the word. It just simply photographs, really what it does is it photographs the page onto an optical disc, which is like a video disc. 55,000 frames per side. Takes more than one frame to contain a journal article, but you can get an awful lot of stuff onto an optical disc. So here's the scheme. We'll make discs out of the world's technical journals, medical journals, scientific journals. The original scheme said we'll put them in jukeboxes. Okay? All your employees have to do, instead of going to the stacks and taking something off and spreading it on the photocopying machine, is you get an order. Comes in through a citation. You go to a citation. You go to a vendor. You look up your citation. You find that your reference is to a journal that you don't have. You say, okay, I want that article from the journal I don't have. That article has an accession number. You go into the Adonis system with an accession number. Automatically, from the accession number, that number would go into a jukebox. This is the idealized system. Just the same way you punch buttons on a jukebox. And instead of getting Little Richard, you get, that's how I'm lying. Instead of getting Little Richard, you get the optical disc flips out. And essentially the laser goes right to that point on the optical disc. The nice thing about optical discs, video discs, is you search by frame. Okay, you go right to the frame you want. It's different than having a videotape or a regular LP record, which you have to go and find that part, that band on the record or the frame in the videotape. Automatically, you go to everything is numbered, in effect. So automatically, you go to the frame you want, which is the beginning of the journal article, and bang, the journal article gets printed out. You take it out of the jukebox, it comes right out of a slot for you, put it in an envelope, off it goes. Of course, it gets right back in the mails again. Which means, what time have you saved? You've saved very little time. I mean, you've saved the time it took to push the damn Xerox machine through the stacks, right? And get it up the elevator, right floor, and all that stuff. Of course, if you could, instead of extracting that from that article from the jukebox, you could send it by satellite, wideband network, to a receiving station in any city, any major library. Lo and behold, the article would be there very fast, almost instantaneously. Great scheme. Negotiations between the Adonis Group and the British Library Lending Division are still going on. There's no telling what's finally going to happen. A similar system is being tested right here in the Library of Congress. It's already in operation for the catalog cards. Okay? It will be used to store periodicals. I think the fallacy, there's a fallacy in the system. The fallacy is that 3% of the photocopying is done in one place, and then the results of that photocopying are put in the mail and sent someplace else. 97%, that's where the bucks are done right on site, and a lot of it's done in libraries. Mostly what you do in the library is, you go to the stacks. That's in one situation. You go to the stacks, you find the 1952 issue of Time magazine that you want, and you spread it out on a photocopying machine, you put a dime in, and you get a copy, whatever it is. If it's a scholarly journal, and you're in a place like Exxon, or now Squibb, you pay the Copyright Clearance Center a fee for copying a page or copying an article. It's an honor system. It's cumbersome. You got to fill out paper. It's not automatic. Suppose you had a jukebox in the library, and you went to the stacks and you verified, yes, I want that article from the 19-something issue of Time magazine, and there's an optical disc that contains that issue. You go to the jukebox. You punch in the accession number for that article. A sign comes up. It says pay $2.50. Doesn't say pay 10 cents a page anymore. It says pay $2, whatever Time decides it wants to charge. Maybe it still wants to charge 10 cents a page. Automatically, the machine records who gets that money. Some might go to the library for having the jukebox there. Some goes back to the publisher. Whole different system. You're allowed to have a whole different kind of system because everything's automatic, electronic. So basically, however, this group is working on trying to profit from the business of interlibrary loan, as it's called, or making copies in one place because that one place has that issue of the journal that you need the article from, and shipping it to your place. The Library of Congress is working on a demonstration workstation that will be, I guess, in their main reading room, that will have various publications on optical discs, and you'll go in, you'll sit down, and you'll say, I want to see something, and it might just show up on a screen first for verification, and then you can print it out if you want. Someday, I think these kinds of machines will be in libraries rather than photocopying machines, simply because it's going to be a way for everybody who put the money into making the article in the first place to get something back when somebody makes a copy of it. It's in the future. And these machines aren't cheap. Adonis is asking publishers to spend 60 cents a page to put their articles into the system. They want to start with 3,000 scholarly journals, and they want to create a back file starting this year and go up in a year or two, a back file of a couple of years. If you look at searching, incidentally, 50% of searches are all done within 3 years back from the date when you search. So that, at least 50%. So that half of what you're looking for has been published within 3 years. Of course, half of what you're looking for is older, but that at least is an encouraging number. 60 cents a page is much cheaper, as we talked about, than scanning with a Kurzweil line by line. Okay? But it's still expensive. I mean, you look at one of the next, concurrent with the Kirk Othmer Encyclopedia, we'll be putting online our polymer journals. And we publish 12,000 pages a year of polymer journals in three different journals. Just to put those into the Adonis system would cost $7,200. And a lot of publishers are a lot I mean, that's just 3 of our journals. We have about 60 journals. It's beginning to be a lot of money to put your journals into the system. And so you've got to say, well, how much are people going for interlibrary loan, or are my journals really in everybody's library who needs them, and they don't really get stuff through interlibrary loan? Should I become part of this system which deals with this 3%, or should I be cheerleading Bill Welsh and the Library of Congress on, yeah, get that thing up, show everybody how it works, and let's get them in the major libraries so people don't have to pay, even if they pay 11 cents to make a copy of a page, and 1 penny goes to the publisher, it'll be worth it. I think, because there is such a tremendous volume of copies. You know, there's arguments. How many copies is this 3%? Some people say this is 10 million articles a year. It's a lot. Worldwide. Okay, quickly, let me go on to how we're all going to deal with this brave new world in a much more rational way. You get a manuscript in now in a publishing house. When I was editing, sometimes people would come in and they'd say, here's my manuscript. I'd say, terrific. Let's fill out the forms. So you have to fill out forms. I mean, publishing is mostly filling out forms. So you fill out the forms, okay, and you get an author's questionnaire that says what this book is about, which you know you're going to sell maybe 2,000 to 3,000 copies of a very small market, professional and scholarly book in 3 to 5 years. Most of the books that Wiley publishes fall into that category. Some, of course, do a lot better. That's why we're still alive. But most of them do like that, and you price them very high. Anyway, a person comes in with a book, say, that's terrific. You fill out some forms. Say, okay, before we go to lunch, and of course you have to have lunch, it's publishing. You say, let's go up to the production department. I would take them up the elevator, but you can't get between our floors by walking. You have to, because the stairways are locked. They're only for people who want to steal something. If you work there, you can't use the stairs. Okay, so you go up 1 flight. I used to have 1 flight to the production place. I go over to Bob Fletcher's office and say, this is the production place. Here's your manuscript. I drop it on the floor. That's it. It sits on the floor then for 2 weeks. This was, you know, people said, oh, that's what you're doing. Yes, that's what I do with the manuscript. Okay, so the manuscript starts going to copy editors. People start working through the manuscript, making sure that, well, trying to put what an engineer thinks is English. They always, my favorite one was, nobody who writes a book anymore says this book. They say the present work. The present work instead of this book. And you change it, and then they change it back. So we wind up publishing stuff that the first words in the preface don't say this book. It says the present work. Anyway, so it goes through copy editing. It's all handled on paper. Okay? Even though people have word processors, we can't, you know, something comes out of a word processor in a floppy disk form. If we were going, we can't take the floppy disk to a compositor and make a photo composition tape. You've got to translate the floppy disk to a tape that can then be massaged into a photocom tape by having printer's commands added to it. So therefore, mostly, since that's very hard, and there are, I don't know how many different word processors are on the market, and we have, it's a problem, a special problem to deal with a floppy disk of each brand of word processor. We deal with paper still, mostly. Okay. So manuscript goes to copy editing. Handled on paper. Okay. And it's treated as a book. I mean, somebody brings in a manuscript, this is my book. Okay, fine, we're going to publish this as a book. It goes back and forth from the author. Okay? I mean, the author sees and says, my God, you've changed the meaning of all these sentences, you dumb copy editor. And the copy editor comes to the editor and said, the acquiring editor, and says, this idiot changes this book back to the present work constantly. So, and some copy editors know the difference between that and which, or that, few of us know. And, you know, so they argue about these things, and it goes back and forth. Eventually, the manuscript gets to the stage where galleys are made. And if you're not in the frame, you know, what publishing companies are now trying to do is they're trying to shorten the time scale between the delivery of this manuscript and the dropping of it on the floor of the production department and the time when the book is going out of the warehouse to the stores for sale, okay, or through the mail, which is mostly the way you sell professional scholarly. Books is through the mails. Even though we're trying to shorten that time frame, nevertheless, you generally still give the author a chance to correct galleys and to correct pages. All this is done in paper form. It goes back and forth in the mails all this time. Sometimes it even gets lost. Extra copies have to be made. It's a very cumbersome, time-consuming process. It takes 9 to 11 months between the time the author delivers the manuscript and the time the book comes out. This is just the text part, of course, that we're talking about, that I've talked about so far. I mean, when you get a manuscript, you ask that all of the illustrations be in a separate pile, because those go to the illustration department, usually for redrawing, a lot of the pencil sketches. And for a lot of other things have to be done for them. The third part of a delivery of a manuscript, you have text, you have illustrations, you have the legend manuscript, which are all the titles to all of the tables and figures. All of those are handled separately, mostly in the illustration department. All of this, and then when the illustrations are ready and the book has been laid out, it's all blended together. All of this is done on paper. All of it's done back and forth through the mails. It all takes 9 to 11 months. The ideal is 3 months, according to management decree. Whether that's reasonable or not, no one knows yet. That's an ideal to shoot for. How could you possibly do it? The way you can, the only chance that you have really is to keep everything in machine-readable form. What you hope is in the future, everybody's going to be doing manuscripts on word processors. You're going to get floppy disks. You're going to be able to translate those floppy disks into a tape. The tape then will go to the compositor. The compositor will massage the tape by adding printing commands. You will have massaged the tape, or even the floppy disk. You will massage the information to put it in proper form. You edit it online, essentially, or in a computer framework, computerized framework. But the point is that you want to keep, as much as possible, everything in machine-readable form. There's something else that comes out of this, though, in addition to speeding up this process. If you have everything in machine-readable form, you can then consider that a book is not simply a book anymore, it's a database. And so what you come out with then is something that you can, if you can have in machine-readable form in your own computer or your compositor's computer, and from that machine-readable version of that book you can produce the book. Or you can produce something that you might want to put online in one of these services. Or you can say to the author, okay, look, you've got a subject that we know is going to go out of date very fast, in part. You've got basic theory in the first 6 chapters, that's going to last for a long time, and then you've got applications, or you've got data to which you apply this basic theory, and that's going to change. Why don't we set up a newsletter operation or an update service from your book? So you put the book online, it's in machine-readable form, you've done it all because you want to compress that 9 to 11 months to 3 months. But you've got another reason for doing it now. You get more money for yourself and for the author out of that single project than you could before. Simply because you can put if you've got the data in machine readable form, you can begin to manipulate it and you begin to pull out lots of different products from it. Whole new way of looking at publishing. Whole new way of dealing with this cumbersome process is back here, where everything is in paper form. Let's suppose you've got a book that has lots of tables in it. You might want to publish the book as a book and also put the tables online. Same people who buy the book will say, there are too many tables, I can't bother to look through this whole thing. To find exactly what I want, if I could get at it electronically, it's easier to search. Let's suppose you say, I'm going to corner the market in freshman physics. The way you used to corner the market in freshman physics was that you would publish the best freshman physics textbook and it would beat all the others. Now you say, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to get everybody who's going to write a freshman physics book. I'm going to publish 5 or 6 freshman physics books. I'm going to put them all online. I'm going to say, okay, you want chapter 1 from this one, you want chapters 2 through 7 from this other one, you want to go back to the first one, you want this combination of problems from this one and that one and whatever. I'll give you anything you want. Collection of all these things instantly produced for your class. The AAP is suing NYU and a copy company and professors and God knows who else, because what they did was they took a number of books and journals over to a Xerox place and they said, make us a course from chapter 1 from this book, these 2 journal articles, chapter 3 from that book. Now you can do it yourself. And the future will also probably be that the worst thing you have in a publishing company is your warehouse. I mean, it's, especially in a professional and scholarly publishing company, you mostly sell 1 copy to 1 customer at a time. You, for example, you send out a mailing piece, and the chemist looks and says, I need this book. So the chemist has the librarian, let's say, or has somebody write a purchase order. The purchase order comes in for one $75 book. Okay? You've got to, then somebody has to go walking over to the stacks, extract the book, do all the paperwork, put it in an envelope, and mail it. Let's suppose you had it in machine-readable form. This is the real future now. And there's a printer remotely located. Let's suppose it's an installation, it's a company that's big enough, or it's a central place in a remote city from where you have your computer. What you do is you send the information through telecommunications to that printer, which will just print out the book right at the installation. College bookstore, you can certainly envision that, because what you want is, you want to have it printed out right in the college bookstore rather than cartons of books through trucks from your warehouse in New Jersey, which is where we happen to have ours, to some college bookstore in Illinois. Very inefficient, very expensive. The future will be probably that you'll have a lot of what is called, a name for this is demand publishing, or a name for part of this, that the college bookstore owner will, a manager will say, I want to have printed out on this printer, which is dedicated to Wyden, let's say, or this McGraw-Hill or Prentice Hall printer, 75 copies of this textbook for this professor who's teaching the course. And it'll be printed out right there. Perhaps even perfect bound someplace, or some other binding will occur. I don't think we should fool ourselves that books will look as good as they do now. But what you're having now is that the prices of books are so high to kids that the used textbook market is enormous. With the economy in the shape it's in, and the prices that they charge now to get a degree, which won't get you a job anyway anymore, the college bookstores no longer have all those t-shirts, beer mugs, etc. I mean, instead of beer mugs, of course, you go and buy what you need on the corner from somebody who is an entrepreneur. But they don't have that anymore. And what's that space devoted to? It's devoted to used textbooks. Publishers try and get around that. If you look at a page of a textbook now, here's the page of the textbook, and here's the stuff, and they hope people write in over here. Or they're like those people I see on the subway in New York all the time using the yellow thing to write through. I could never figure out what to do. I would do every word yellow. I could never figure out which is more important than another. So they would publishers try to make the books used in such a way that nobody wants them the second time. But look, $30 for a freshman physics book or a freshman chemistry book, and people say, I don't care what it looks like. I don't care what's marked in it. Just give me a used copy for 15, 10, whatever. So, you see the situation in college bookstores, which is very different than it used to be. It's so bad that we had a situation where there was a fire in a major college bookstore I think it was this past summer. After they had given us their first order, all the used textbooks burned up. They had to give us another order, it went up 46%. So, I mean, we're getting killed with this. And maybe if we went to demand publishing, maybe we could reduce the prices. Maybe we could deal with the situation differently. Most of the kids don't want to keep them anyway. So if you give them to them even spiral bound or put in a 3-ring binder, they'd use them for a year and throw them out. Perhaps that's the situation. You might not want to do professional reference books that way. You certainly don't want to do on-the-shelf library books that way. But then the situation's swimming around so much that you don't even know whether people are going to be building stacks and having books on stacks anymore. It's too expensive to build new buildings, to put in stacks, to put in all of these new journal issues, which seem to be overrunning everybody. So we're seeing, I think you'll see a whole different scene in the future. Another thing that's happening is, if I can leave that, any questions about the prognostication? One other thing that's rather interesting that's going on is combining video discs with retrieval systems that have bibliographic information or even full text. And this is especially useful in the medical area. BRS has got a thing now set up for, I think it's for emergency rooms, but we've proposed to them a set of books that are on medical imaging techniques, ultrasound, x-ray, whatever, that marry these two technologies. The video disc allows you not only to raster scan a page of words, but to scan a page that has pictures on it. What BRS, one of the retrieval services, has done is they put Gray's Anatomy on a disc with text. So that you say, well, I want to look at a picture of the clavicle, and you can immediately find through, let's say you had in this system, in your retrieval system, instead of citations, you just had page references that said clavicle was on page 43. You punch 43 and the video disc flips around and you get that picture of the clavicle that you want. Essentially, this is slave to this system. Now you can broaden the scope of this and imagine that you take all the medical textbooks that there are, or medical books, that talk about or that show pictures of various imaging techniques. And you say, well, I want to look at all of the pictures that show this particular problem, this tumor inside tumor, and showed all the ways they got to look at it and what it looked like, etc. And you might, if you have a big enough system, you store the pictures from a number of different books. You use your retrieval system to find the pages that you want to go to, and you immediately get those pictures right away for yourself on a screen. No need then to go into a shelf or a number of shelves or stacks and go through books, the physical books, trying to find what you're looking for. this is a much faster technique of getting at the pictures. So this marriage is has been done, and they're beginning to try and install this kind of a system in emergency rooms, I think, and some other kinds of locations in medical settings, so that when people say, look, the people who are working in the setting say, I want to take a look at what this normally looks like, or what this looks like inside this area, they can immediately get to that information. And you don't have a situation, I mean, we've all been to the doctor in a situation where you come in describing something, the doctor disappears in the back room because he's looking it up. I mean, you can't know everything. So now he'll disappear in the back room, he'll be punching the buttons, and it'll sound like he's playing Space Invaders. And really what he's doing is he's looking for pictures. And so you've got this new kind of marriage of material. Now, this has also been used for the Pergamon patent search. And on the notion that the front page of a patent is the important piece of information, Pergamon essentially puts front pages of patents into a system, into a video disc system, and you search to find out which front pages you want to look at, and then you are shown those front pages. And that gets you back to the information, back to looking at the patents you want to look at. Other people are saying, well, look, the video disc not only has the silent and stills on it, but it is a very powerful thing because you can combine sound and moving pictures. So why not have encyclopedias that not only show you pictures of birds, but show you pictures of those birds flying, and you hear the sounds of those birds, etc. Considering the number of frames you can get on a video disc, considering the notion that you can search the video disc easily, that may be the way they'll be selling Britannica will be putting encyclopedias out. Right now, Britannica has its encyclopedias on the Lexis system, words only. I don't know, and no one knows whether they are making any money with that, whether the revenues generated are substantial at all. The Academic American Encyclopedia, which is on BRS and going up on BRS and is on Dow Jones, was written especially to be an electronic encyclopedia. That is, it has 28,000 short articles. We just looked up the article in Stravinsky. It was 8 short paragraphs, which is probably, I mean, much shorter than you would normally find on somebody like that, I suppose, in a music encyclopedia. But it has a lot of entries. No moving pictures, of course. They originally thought they would do Academic American with a combination video disc and text retrieval system. But then the company was sold, and the person who was running Academic American decided that was then no longer involved, and they dropped the video disc part. But that's probably, for an encyclopedia, I would suspect that's the way of the future. That you will see them sold in a more TV oriented format, in addition to the print product. Instead of the print product, who knows the way that's going to go. Nobody, in my view, is going to be reading books on screens. That's not what this is all about. What they are going to be doing is looking at pictures on screens with the backup, probably hard copy, because the resolution's a lot better, you can see more. I would think that's going to hold true for a while, but it may not. You never know about that sort of thing. But nobody's going to be reading books on, I hope, on screens. I think that's ridiculous. What they are going to be using the systems for is going to be the traditional stuff. Fast lookup of things that are buried, or fast flipping through large masses of material to get at what you want. Then you might either go to the hard copy, in some way. It may be printed out right there for you. It may be located someplace else on a shelf somewhere, either in your home, your office, your library. Mostly, however, there will be fewer hard copies, I would guess. Simply because people will say, look, what I can do in my office is I can find what I want to look at. If I have to go to the library, I'll go, but I no longer have to have, and you've seen, if you go around to Bell Labs or places where you've got working engineers and scientists, you see that you come upon offices, somebody has 200 handbooks. Some of them all filled with the same wrong piece of information for something. These things get perpetuated. Nevertheless, it's a mess, and you can't find what you want, and you just go through handbook after handbook until you try and isolate what you want. The other way, of course, that most people get that kind of information, they call somebody else, and they say, what's the value? And often that person has to go through 200 handbooks. But I think you're going to see more of this kind of stuff in the future. And you're going to see, obviously, publishers will be handling their data or their knowledge in machine-readable form so they can adapt it to this kind of system immediately, rather than putting it into print form and then backing into this kind of system. You know, you can store anything digitally. It just takes more volume, more digits, more information. A chemical structure can be stored, as people are doing it, in a machine. It just takes more to store that structure, more space, more bits, than it does to store the name of that material. Okay. Basically, then, that's what I had to say. This is the dialogue catalog, which I might pass around and get that back to me. This is the results of a search which was done on the Words trade shows. You'll see that, let me just circle that. You'll see a word ADJ next to it. Between. Did you use? That's BRS. ADJ has to be used because the command structure of the system is such that you can't just type in the two words trade shows, you have to type in trade ADJ shows. One of the things that these damn systems don't do right is, I don't search very much. I can't. Okay, so I went to search the database and I said, I'll search for trade shows. So I hadn't searched for a while, and I typed in AU for the author. I wanted all the authors who'd used the words trade shows in their articles, whether they were writing about trade shows. If you look at some of those articles, they're not about trade shows. They mention trade shows sometimes in the articles. I typed in AU, comma. I skipped a space. So I typed in TI, comma, and I skipped the space, and let's say I typed in AD. Invalid command. Now, if you're a trained searcher, you're going to know that what you did wrong was you shouldn't have had spaces here. I think that was what the problem was, although of course I instantly forget what the problem was. Somebody had to tell me, who was a trained searcher. Luckily, I had that person sitting by my side. What's wrong? So barriers have been erected by these damn systems to keep people like me who just want to casually go in now and then to find pieces of information from getting at the information. I mean, I could have stayed around you can think up 18 different ways why that might be an invalid command. Maybe they should be reversed. Maybe, who knows, right? Who could tell? Just by the fact that there were spaces. And why wasn't the system forgiving? Why does the system give a damn if you leave a space? I mean, it made no sense. It makes no sense. Well, you're paying for the time, yes, but it's so little time. Yes, you're paying for the time so they can keep giving you invalid commands and keep you on. Well, you know, that's one of the things we face with full text. A lot of the searchers say, I'm going to get false drops. I mean, if I go into trade shows, I get too much stuff. Don't want all this stuff. And we have to say, well, look, it's still cheap enough, and you may get some interesting hits that will pick up information. Suppose there were no articles on trade shows. The reason we did this was there happened to be an article in the current issue of the Harvard Business Review, How to Get More Out of Your Trade Shows. Okay? So we said, I wonder if there are any earlier articles without even consulting the references. And we just went in with the trade adjacent shows. And you have to be a trained searcher, at least rudimentarily trained, to know to type in ADJ between trade and shows. I mean, idiot like me doesn't type in. When I started the search, that's a clean search. When I started the search, I just typed in trade shows. It went nuts. I mean, it didn't give me what I wanted from the system. So we have a situation where we have all kinds of problems getting to the people we really want to get to. Sure, the librarians have a function in this. And sure, the librarians are going to be doing a lot of very sophisticated searching. Nevertheless, with a lot of products, like movie reviews, which Dow Jones has online, and Dow Jones makes its search software much easier than BRS, or like the Harvard Business Review, or like the full text of the Kirk Hoffman Encyclopedia of Chemical Technology. We want the chemists, the business people, all those people to do it directly, in addition to having the librarian search. And we got these systems who, and this is another thing that's interesting about the industry, is that these people are doing things that these people don't always want them to do. Some of these people are becoming these people too, in the notion that these people are going to become publishers as well. I mean, there's going to be a little bit of mix-up in the industry pretty soon, I think. And you're going to get situations where you're going to have new kinds of publishers. Don't have necessarily the old traditions that the other ones have. But those kinds of changes are inevitable given that you're dealing with an entirely new way of getting at information. So, I guess that's it. Any questions? Anyone's either asleep or...
How does that downloading work if you don't have a password? I don't understand how.
Oh, you do have a password. You go online and you do a search that is it doesn't say just give me all the articles on the trade shows. It says give me every citation you have in your database from 1977 through 1983, January. And you get it all. And you download it right to your own machine. And then you have search software and you search it. Well, what do? You charge by the character count. You have the online service send you a letter and send a letter to the person who did that saying you just did something that you shouldn't do, unless you're not going to use it again, or unless you're not going to search it, or unless you're not going to resell it. Or you say, look, I got the kind of data that you can do it, it's fine. However, the price now is not by the hour and not by the character count. It's $1,000 a year, let's say, or $10,000 a year license for you to have a password to my database renewable every year. Download it all you want. Do whatever you want. I don't care. Except don't resell it. And so you use some sort of pricing mechanism to deal with it. Whether that fits into how people feel about rights and permissions and copyright, I'm not sure. I think one of the problems we have now is that in traditional publishing companies, the lawyers and the rights and permissions people have to become much more machine-readable information literate before we're going to really mess up these issues with a lot of talk. Any more questions? Well, thank you all. But